G'day, this is Jason. We're at Renner Auto, my business here in Melbourne East. We're producing some classic cars, having a lot of fun doing so, I must add, always having a great time doing it. But I'd just like to go through some of the stuff we do here, a bit of my background, a bit of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and some of the great customers we have and some of the great cars we're working on. We'll answer some of the questions that actually some people have been out there asking, so hope you enjoyed the video. My background and history with cars has been really there since I got my license. So like most of us in the car enthusiast community, been working on cars since as long as I can remember, go-karts, then cars, etc. So, you know, started off with an air-cooled 64 Beetle was my first car. You know, when I was 18, full restoration, you know, ground up work on it. So, you know, getting rid of 6 volt to 12 volt back in the day. So really a lot of air-cooled cars for a long time, from the Beetle then to early 911s. To be honest, Porsche was a brand that, you know, was always a favourite of mine. What I wanted to do as in my future life, and it was always work on cars, so it was doing a mechanical engineering course at RMIT, and when completing that, going into the automotive component supply industry. I was very lucky graduating at the time I did, because there's a very strong design and manufacturing environment in Australia and in Melbourne as well. So I was able to work and start my career at a company called Air International, and going in there and having a pattern shop and a machine shop and all those things as a graduate engineer with a hands-on approach was an awesome opportunity. Yeah, so I started when I was at Air International in the R&D lab. So that was testing powertrain cooling solutions, air conditioning solutions, and then really moving into the climatic wind tunnel, which had a dynamometer. So my young years were really a mix of being on the tools, but also CAD was still very much used in those days, and rapid prototyping was really just starting. So it was a great opportunity at those companies to work on OE engineering projects, really at the global level. I transitioned into another component supplier that worked a lot on electrical systems within automotive. So I really enjoyed the opportunity working with electrical connectors, harnessing, FPV, gearbox harnessing. So yeah, lots of really good opportunities for a company that was a global company, a massive company. So the opportunities to develop parts, have patents in my name, you know, so things like that were great. So, you know, that career really spanned about 30 years, which was a long time out of engineering. Look, the cars I've built and been involved with, probably the fondest memory was the early 911 from way back. That was a great car. You know, when I bought that, it was a 1970 2.2 litre E, you know, and you buy that back then, showing my age, for around 10 grand. So you buy that, and at the time, you know, they didn't really mean what they mean today, but you had a bit more freedom in what you could do. So obviously I gutted that car, heavily modified the suspension, and, you know, built it as a track car. I used to go to Porsche club events and just do track car weekend stuff with it, and, you know, it had one seat, no interior, and I'd drive it on the weekend at a track, and then I'd go to work on the Monday. Was never a great driver, so I'd be going to work with, you know, 4 flat spot tyres, rattling my teeth out in this little 911. I was so fortunate back then on the 911, and from that 911 I then really progressed to looking at new cars. So, you know, a new Porsche, and at that point in time, after you've had a few of those, you sort of yearned back for a car that was a bit more personal and all the rest. So that's when I decided to do the GT40, and that was really about trying to wrap as much tech and engine and design into the smallest package possible, and it's a tiny car. So, you know, that was something that, again, I did after work in my spare time to relax. And it was really that car that when I finished my professional career and really sat down and wondered what I wanted to do moving forward, that, you know, after a while of, you know, just thinking about what I wanted to do, I thought, well, you know, the classic, I'm going to follow my passion and see where it takes me. During that time, an XJ13 was built, which was another load of fun. So it's a Jaguar XJ13 with a V12 engine in the back, with a Lamborghini Gallardo transaxle mated to it, full aluminium monocoque chassis product with the XJ13 body on top. So that was a load of fun. Also a 1600 horsepower Mercury, you know, a really high level sort of fit and finish vehicle with custom glass and CNC everything, and, you know, so that was a lot of fun also. And it really opened up really the approach that I take when I'm building a car, which is a little different to some, because I'm relying quite heavily on technology and processes that were still very new when I was in the OE industry, and really have carried that through. And I think that's probably the biggest differentiator on how we build cars here. Why a Speedster? I think, you know, a Speedster, it was a beautiful vehicle. I've always wanted that type of vehicle, but, you know, I always wanted a particular type of Speedster. These days, probably buying a Speedster and tearing it up to the degree that I would tear it up probably wouldn't be a popular thing to do, and it would also be quite an expensive thing to do. So the move to really produce a Speedster that embodied everything that I wanted in a car was sort of really a fairly logical thing to do. You're really just hitting your favourites. You've done the GT40. The GT40 is a great car, but, you know, it's a tough car to drive around. It's, you know, it has a lot of things that make it a great drive for 10-15 minutes, and after that, you know, it gets a little loud and all the other stuff as you get a bit older that you find a bit of a chore. So the Speedster is a very comfortable car and can be made into a capable car. So really that's why I chose it. It's just incredibly beautiful. And then really it was sitting there with a blank piece of paper, other than the wheelbase and all the dimensions that you had to adhere to for a Speedster, sitting there with no suspension and 4 wheels was really a unique opportunity. The design of the Speedster really started with, obviously, all of the critical features that couldn't change. So you've got wheelbase, you've got wheel type, and obviously the styling of the body is something that is not something you want to change on the Speedster. So a lot of the other cars that we did, they had probably 30-40% digital data in them. So we'd scan a body or scan other components and do the car maybe only 30% digital, whereas the Speedster program, because we were starting with a clean slate, was planned to be 100% digital, every component. So, you know, scanning all the assets of wheels and tyres and all that stuff from both original cars, recreation parts, was a huge undertaking, but it was something that gave us an environment that enabled us to design the car in a very detailed fashion. And I guess, sort of to reiterate, that's where some people have a lot of freehand ability when they're building a car, because they've got, you know, 50, 60 years of experience doing it. When you haven't had that amount of experience, you really have to rely back on the technology and package everything digitally. It's just the way we work, it's the way I prefer working, and it generates a result where the opportunity to get it very, very close first time is possible. So, you know, what you can see here is obviously the outer skin of the Speedster. We can really break it down into, you start to see all of the chassis panels, all the components underneath the skin. That whole system, that whole semi-unibody chassis system with all custom suspension, was developed over really thousands of hours of CAD time. We had the opportunity to not have to use the traditional Speedster torsion bar suspension system. We could move into a far more modern system with rack and pinion steering and everything modern in the vehicle. So starting with the 4 wheels, we really worked inwards and optimized the suspension arms, the suspension system, and they've made a unibody chassis system that then fit all that inside. So some of the major decisions that you really have to make early on are obviously the powertrain choice. seating position, all of those major building blocks. And really the time you spend in those areas with a clean slate can drastically affect the final product in how comfortable it is, obviously the power it possesses. So if we start the drivetrain, we're producing a vehicle that needs to comply with a lot of ADR requirements. The engine has to be emissions compliant. Air-cooled engines it's just not possible to get Euro or whatever level emissions compliance you have to achieve for registration these days. So we wanted a horizontally opposed four-cylinder. That really leaves only a very small number of choices. We've obviously chosen a Subaru power plant. At the time of design, we thought, well, there's a number of issues. We don't want a Subaru sound. We need to determine whether we're normally aspirated or turbocharged, and we need to package a gearbox as well, or a transaxle. We made the choice to package most of everything we could. So we wanted a turbocharged 2.5 litre EJ25, pretty much, WRX spec, brand new everything engine. And then we wanted a 5-speed gearbox. We didn't want to run a 4-speed gearbox. We wanted close ratio. We wanted really good 5th gear. So we ran a close ratio turbo Subaru transaxle with LSD. So that package is actually quite large. Obviously necessitated removal of torsion bars, moving the engine and transaxle very far forward in the car for weight distribution, and then working with PWR in Queensland on a really good cooling system that is ultra quiet and not visible. So we didn't want fans running, we didn't want a lot of noise. So with PWR, we were able to develop a radiator system with very large spiral fans, and then we worked also with Davies Craig on coolant pumps, waterless coolant, and developed a package that I'm really proud of. It works on really hot days, runs at about 30-40% fan capacity, and the engine delivers great performance and a terrific sound. We spent a lot of time on the exhaust system, full stainless, making sure we had that early type idle and medium throttle sound. We did not want a Subaru sound in this car. It just doesn't match the character. And I think we really nailed it. Obviously when it comes on boost, it makes a bit of a whine sound. You cannot hide a turbo right behind the driving position. But as a powertrain, it was an excellent outcome. I'm really happy with how it packaged. Driving position, we needed to have seats very low. I'm 6'2". A lot of drivers in a Speedster can look a bit tall. The windscreen's very low. It's not like a coupe. And I wanted to really sit quite low in the car. What hair I have left, I didn't really want blowing too hard. So it was really getting that seat very low. And again, the semi-unibody chassis design, where we're relying a lot on folded structures, sheet metal structures and aluminium floor structures, enabled us to mount that Speedster seat super low. And then we moved to the steering column. We wanted a steering wheel that was perpendicular to the body. Speedsters or 356s, because they have a solid steering column down to the steering box, they're at a slight angle. They're not necessarily right in the middle of the seating position. So we were able to work with a company in the US to make us a custom steering column with a Porsche spline on it, fully collapsible, that really looked correct, so we can mount Porsche wheels onto our steering column. And we run a rack and pinion steering column system. Our suspension ends up being a A-arm front suspension system, so we run an A-arm coil-over front suspension with pretty much virtually zero bump steer. We can control all of our casters, scrub radius, all of the rest in that front suspension. Working with Shockworks on custom coilovers enabled us to get the ride and handling the way we wanted. On the rear, we run a semi-trailing arm that is based on a Porsche semi-trailing arm. We wanted to keep wide 5 wheels on the cars, so that really locks us into a particular hub type. But we again run a coilover suspension system through a shock tower in the rear. And again, motion ratios on those coilovers are very high, at above 0.7. All of these things that we wrote down as a list of things that we wanted in the car, we worked really, really hard to package. if we couldn't make every aspect of the car better than the original in some way, outside of styling, because you can't really beat that, if you can't make each engineered system better than the original, then buy an original. I mean, you know, the recreation has to be better for it to exist. It's a case of trying to have something that looks really great, but just drives better in every possible way. Sound was important, and then when it came to handbrake, even handbrake was important. We want an electronic handbrake because the packaging of a 356 handbrake lever and its arms, and it's very complex. It has its own issues, so we want an electronic system, but then to retain, which Scott will show you when he's in the car, I'm sure, but to retain the original pull handle with the correct lever on it, under the dash in the right position, have the clicks, rotate to release, but it's full electronic. The brake pedals and all the pedal alignment, the pedal boards, all of those things we wanted authentic, down to the high beam switch, the washer pump, the pedal pads. The accelerator pedal is an original pedal, but the accelerator pedals drive by wire. So the brakes are all disc brake, obviously, but they're all power boosted. The clutch is in the right position, but it's hydraulic and it's quite light. So, you know, wrapping all that stuff into the Speedster package was the best fun, because there's really no room for any of it. So if you tried to do that physically on the car, it'd take a lot of iterations. But in CAD, you can package everything very closely, and even the HVAC system, putting full air conditioning and heating in the car. So we run a custom HVAC system with the vents hardly visible, and all the ducting is 3D printed under the dash, and all that system is 3D printed, so it can be packaged to exactly fit in the car. You've got heated seats, you've got all these things that you could call lazy and soft, but when you're in the car and it's a hot day and you've got the AC, or it's cold in the morning, you've got the tonneau cover on, you've got heated seat and the heater running, it's a little surreal. So this really just follows on from the reality of, you sit on CAD, you dream up all this stuff, and the reality is today we've got some great tools that enable us to turn that CAD design into a physical part at a cost that, you know, wasn't really possible 10 years ago. Now, we 3D print all of our own parts in here. We use a number of 3D printers. We've got a small one at 300 by 300 by 600 millimeters. We've just invested in a new 3D printer that does 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter for some of the larger parts that we'll be producing, and we already produce. So, for example, we saw the steering column switch. So we 3D print it, we paint it, we load it on a steering column, and we get this sort of product here, which at the end of the day, you know, it's something we're very proud of. When you get the steering wheel on this, the switch assembly in there, the hazard switch in there with the ducting, it really presents professional detail, but harks back to really that mid-50s design language, and it looks great in the car. But years ago, trying to do this at low volume would have been an incredibly expensive activity. Even the really charming in a 356 or early cars, Volkswagen had something similar. The knob that you'd rotate to rotate the cables that open up the heat exchanger valves to get hot air into your cabin. We fully 3D print this assembly, and some of it's CNC, but here you've got your potentiometer, so you're going from full cold to full hot on your AC or HVAC system, and then you've got compressor on, compressor off, down on the tunnel. It looks authentic. You've just got a couple of arrows here. So it's all the detail in this little assembly here that we put in every car that I have an absolute ball with. You know, I love it, and I make sure that I explain it. You know, and some customers are like, yeah, they've heard it enough, but I really enjoy it. So I always get the opportunity, wherever I get the opportunity, I love showing people all of this stuff, because very proud of it, but you know, it's why we do this stuff. We really enjoy it. It's really turning that design into reality at a low volume, at a very high level, and a lot of fun. And here are some of the parts that really make up the chassis. None of this is, this has been done by a lot of people. It's not a new technology, it's laser cutting, CNC folding. So a lot of people do this. But when you're building a whole car, there is a lot of these parts. And if you try and design them all really well, it ends up being, quite a big process, but making sure the design is well refined and fits together easily, repeatable, was a big battle. I mean, this is an engine mount cradle for the whole rear of the car. Again, just trying to make sure that everything looks nice, doesn't look out of place, the styling sort of all matches, is half the fun. But yeah, great parts. So next week, this sort of bunch of parts here really represents maybe 10% of the car. We've got a lot of parts that make up the whole car. Just looking at it now, I'm like, holy moly, you've got to try and remember where everything goes. And that's the thing, we have drawings for every part, assembly guides, but you sort of look through this and you've got A-arm parts here, various transaxle mounts, etc. But we've got some great suppliers in Melbourne that cut all of these parts for us and CNC fold, so everything's perfect. And then we weld everything in-house, so it's all MIG welded on Kempe equipment. One of the best Kempe welders you can get, which is a terrific machine. And then all the parts are either E-coated or zinc yellow plated. Porsche always had a bit of a zinc yellow fetish on all their nuts and bolts and bracketry, and we tend to do that as well because I love zinc yellow. The colour looks great against the black suspension. But yeah, E-coating, zinc yellow plating, or pacified zinc, there's a few names for it, or powder coating on some of the larger structures we do. Again, nothing out of the ordinary, it's all fairly common. E-coating's not as common as powder coating for most people. E-coating is a very small, very thin, electro-attracted paintwork that's very thin, so it doesn't foul your threads, and it's an automotive process. But all these parts are welded together and then plated, so nothing is spray painted or anything like that. We tend to follow all those design processes, but just looking at the table here, what represents maybe 20%, it's a lot of parts that really go together to make the car. So we're commencing the build of the next 4 Speedsters for the client, for our clients. And this is one of the 4 engines we have. So this is an AVCS 2.5 litre Subaru engine. Unfortunately, you can't call Subaru and order a crate engine. They don't make crate engines. So we start with a brand new 2021 short block from Subaru, and then we have a company in Sydney custom build these engines and transaxles for us. They take apart the short block and do lots of modifications and build us this custom engine. We're not going for massive horsepower. I mean, it's a light car. The car with a full tank of gas, so all fuel with all of the fluids, is around 1100 kilo. So these engines generate enough horsepower that an 1100 kilo car with the horsepower these engines deliver with a 5-speed gearbox is a swift car. But the level of finish in terms of how we have new alternators, new AC compressors, new plastics, obviously it's a new short block. Some parts we get, the heads are a used casting, but they're fully rebuilt. But the engine, when it's done, runs the full AVCS, all of the emissions control, all the vapor control, carbon canister systems, all controlled by the ECU. So it's a neat little package. We put the intercooler on top. You'll see that when you see the engine bay in the car. You can see up here a picture of the chassis lined up, but the intercooler sits right on top and generates, when you open the engine lid, something that's a little more attractive than the plastic housing on top. But great little robust engine, and sounds really good in the 356. So at the end of the day, all those bits we designed really get covered by what I think is one of the most beautiful looking cars ever built. So I think it's time we just go for a drive.